Welcome to solving equations with variables on both sides. This is when it gets really fun. As you can see, I have variables on both sides of my equation. My goal in this game, yes, it is a game, is to get all the variables on one side of the equation and all the numbers on the other side of the equation. How do I do that? I use the properties. I use the addition and subtraction property of equality, and I use the multiplication and division property of equality. There's a reason for that. Let's take a look. I always do my numbers first. I have a -2 and a -1. I need to move everything over to one side. So would it be easier to, the opposite of -2 is +2, the opposite of -1 is +1. Would it be easier to add 2 or add 1? Last time I checked, it's easier to add 1. And what you do to one side, you do to both sides. And then I solve. I move left to right. Okay, -2 and +1 is a -1. I bring down my positive 10p equals, and I bring down my 8p, and +1 -1 equals 0, so I don't have to do anything to it. Okay, now that I have my variables on one side of the equation, I'm going to ask you. I have a positive 10p and a negative 10p. I need to move because I have my numbers on one side, that means I need to move my variables over to the other side. So I need to subtract 10p on both sides. What you do on one side of the equation, you do the other side of the equation. I did not solve this, so I bring this down, -1. -10p and a positive 10p equals 0. That's why I put a big 0 around there. Equals, and -10 and a positive 8 is a -2p. Now, I need to separate the -2p, the -2 from the p. It's attached through multiplication, and the opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by -2. And a -1 over a -2 equals a positive 1/2, and my answer's 1/2. Let's go on to the next one. I have, and this is kind of interesting, I have variables on both sides of the equation, 3w and 7w, but I only have one number. Since my numbers are already on one side, combined on one side of the equation, that means I need to move my variables over to the other side. And I do that by the opposites. The opposites of a positive 3w is a negative 3w. Positive 3w and negative 3w equals 0. Bring down my positive 2 because I did not do anything with that, and I combine my w's. A positive 7 and a -3 is a positive 4w. I need to separate my 4 and w, and they're connected through multiplication. The opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide. And 2/4 equals w. They both have a common factor of 2. So I'm going to divide both by 2. And I get 1/2. And there's my answer. Let's go ahead and do some more. Okay, I have s divided by 2 plus 1 equals 1/4 s minus 6. As you can see, I have my variables on both sides, and I have numbers on both sides. Let's go ahead and combine the numbers first. Is it easier to, when I'm talking about my numbers, I have a positive 1 and a negative 6. Is it easier, and I'm keep asking the same question over again, I need to do the opposite. Would it be easier to subtract 1 or add 6? I'm going to go ahead and subtract 1 because that's the opposite. And I bring down my s divided by 2. That equals 0. Don't forget your equal sign. 1/4 s. And a negative 1 and a negative 6 is a negative 7. Now I'm going to come up here and rewrite this real neat. S over 2 equals 1/4 s minus 7. The reason I did that, notice how I have fractions on the bottom. I want to think of the biggest multiple they have in common. When I think of multiples, I think of 2, 2, 4, 6, 8. And when I think of 4, 4, 8, 12, they have a common multiple of 4. So I'm going to multiply everything by 4. And then I'm going to cross cancel and watch what happens. I have this problem here first. So I have 4 over 1 times s over 2. Cancel. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 2 twice, and 2 times s is 2s. Okay, now I have 4 over, let's not forget my equal sign. Now, 1 times 1/4. 4 over 1 times 1/4, 1 is 1. So that gives me 1s. Minus 4 times negative 7 is a negative 28. And now I don't have fractions anymore. Okay? And we'll be doing another problem like that. So I'm going to now bring my s over to the other side with the s by subtracting. Subtract 1s from both sides. And I get 1s equals negative 28, or s equals negative 28. I'm going to do another problem like that. 3/8 minus 1/4 t equals 1/2 t minus 3/4. Look at your denominators. 8, 4, 2, and 4. What's the largest number they have in common? It's 8. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to multiply everything by 8 over 1. Let me break it down for you. I'm going to multiply 8 over 1 times 3/8. Minus, I'm going to multiply 8 over 1 times 1/4. T, don't forget the t, equals, I'm going to multiply 8 over 1 times 1/2. minus, it's called the distributive property, 8 over 1 times 3/4. Okay, now let's go ahead and simplify, and we'll get rid of our fractions. That's right, my darlings, you can get rid of your fractions. Okay, let's cross cancel. I can cancel my 8 and 8, and 3 over 1 is 3, minus 4 goes into 4 once, 4 goes into 8 twice, 2 times 1 is 2t, equals 2 divided by 2 is 1, 8 divided by 2 is 4, 4 times 1 is a 4t, minus 8 divided by 4 is 2, and 2 times 3 is 6. Doesn't that look a lot simpler to solve? Well, I certainly think so. I'm going to solve my numbers first, and I'm going to ask you, is it easier to subtract 3? Remember, we're doing opposites here. Opposite of positive 3 is a negative 3, so would it be easier to subtract 3 or add 6? I'm going to go with the subtract 3. This gives me 0, so I'm going to put a big 0 around it. I have negative 2t equals 4t. Negative 6 and a negative 3 is a minus 9. Now I'm going to worry about my variables. Since my 9 is over there, I'm going to move my t's over to the other side. And I do that by adding and subtracting. The opposite of positive 4t is negative 4t. Negative 2 and negative 4 is a negative 6t, equals, now that equals 0, so I'm going to put a big 0 around it, left with a negative 9. Now, that's my adding and subtracting. Now I get into my multiplying and dividing. I want to separate the negative 6 and the t. See, I want to separate that. They're connected through multiplication. The opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by negative 6. That gives me a 1. I'm left with t equals negative 9 over negative 6 is going to be positive 9, 6. And I can reduce both by dividing by 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. And there's my answer. Or 1 1/2. Okay, let's try some more. Now that we move all the variables over to the other side and all the numbers to one side, we have to do the distributive property. Okay, and if you remember, the distributive property is when we distribute through multiplication the number on the outside. So we're going to say 4 times 2r is 8r, minus, and then 4 times 8 is 32, equals 1/7 times 49. Now, watch this little trick. I like these tricks. 7, ooh, that's cool. I told you that was a trick. Okay, 7 or 49 divided by 7 is 7 with my variable r. Like that. Plus 70 divided by 7 is 10. No more fraction. I'm telling you, you can get rid of these fractions so easy. Okay, now we are ready to move. Now, I can say to myself, I'm always looking at my numbers first. I have a negative 32 and a positive 10. what would be easier to move? I'm looking at the 10. Why, you ask? Because it's smaller. The opposite of positive 10 is a negative 10. Hey, that's a pretty straight line. I bring down my 8r because I didn't use it. Negative 32 and negative 10, the signs are the same, so I find the sum. So I add them together. 32 plus 10 is 42. Take the sign of the larger number. So that's negative 42 equals, bring down my 7r, and positive 10, negative 10 equals 0, so I put a big fat 0 around it. Now I can move my 8r over to the other side. Remember, I'm not separating them, so I'm adding and subtracting them. Some people get that mixed up. I just want to move this r over the other side, and so I have to do the opposite. The opposite of a positive 8r is a negative 8r. I'm not separating them. I will in a second. That equals 0, so I put a big fat 0. I bring down my negative 42. And negative 8 and positive 7 will give me a negative r, or negative 1. A lot of times you don't have to write the 1 in front of the variable. Now, I'm not done. The reason I'm not done is because you can't leave a variable with a negative sign. What did I say this was? I said this was a 1. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to treat it like any other coefficient. I want to separate the negative 1 and the r. So I'm going to divide by negative 1. And that gives me negative and negative is a positive equals r. There you go. Let's do another one. (8s minus 10) equals 3 times 6 minus 2s. Okay, I'm going to rewrite my problem distributing the 3 to whatever's inside the parentheses. 8s minus 10, I have not solved that yet. 3 times 6 is 18, and 3 times negative 2s is a negative 6s. Now I'm going to move my numbers. Would it be easy? I have a negative 10 and 18. Would it be easier to move the 10 and the 18? I always use the smaller number if you can't figure that out yet. Okay, so the opposite of negative 10 is positive 10. And it doesn't matter which one you move or where you move it, as long as you move all the numbers to one side and all the variables to the other side. It kind of looks like an 85, doesn't it? That's not. It's an 8s. This equals 0 equals 18 plus 10 is 28 minus 6s. Now I'm ready to bring my s over the other side. I'm just moving it over to the other side. I'm not separating it. When I move something, I'm going to add and subtract. The opposite of negative 6s is a positive 6s. And moving left to right. 8 plus 6 is 14s equals 28. And I don't do anything here because that equals a big fat 0. Okay, now this is when I apply my multiplying and dividing properties of equality. I want to separate that 14 and the s. I want to pull them apart. So I ask myself, how are they connected? They're connected through multiplication. And the opposite of multiplication is division. And s equals 28 divided by 14 is 2. So as you're going through this process, you have to continually ask yourself these questions. Let's take a look at another one. 7 times n minus 1 equals negative 2 times 3 plus n. Here I'm going to have to apply the distributive property twice. What gives you the hint that it's the distributive property? Well, you have parentheses, step 1. You have an operation inside parentheses, and then you have a number variable on the outside of the parentheses. That tells you it's the distributive property. I need to multiply my 7 times n to get 7n. 7 times negative 1 is negative 7. Bring down my equal sign. Now negative 2 times 3 is negative 6, and negative 2 times n is a negative 2n. Now I'm ready to move my variables and my numbers. And what do I always move first? I prefer, and it's just a preference, it doesn't matter which one you do, I like to move my numbers first. So let's go ahead and move the numbers. And I bet you can guess which one I'm going to move. Am I going to move the negative 7 or the negative 6? You're right. I'm going to move the negative 6 because it's smaller. I like working with smaller numbers. The opposite of a negative 6 is positive 6. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. I'm going to bring down what I don't use, which is 7n. I can solve negative 6 and negative 7 and positive 6, which is negative 1. Bring down my equal sign. This gives you a big fat 0, leaving me with a negative 2n. Now my numbers are all on one side. Now I need to move my variables on the other side. My variables are 7n and a negative 2n. I bet you can guess I need to move the 7 over to the other side. The opposite of negative 7n, the opposite of positive 7n is a negative 7n. Okay, this gives me a big fat 0. Negative 1 equals, and a negative 7 and a negative 2 is a negative 9n. Now, this is when the multiplication division comes in. I need to separate the negative 9 and the n. How are they connected? They're connected through multiplication. Multiplication's like glue. It has the coefficient and the variable stuck together. The only thing that will undo that glue is the opposite of multiplication. And the opposite of multiplication is negative 9. Negative divided by negative is a positive, equals n. And there's my answer. Very good. I want to do another one. I like doing these. These are fun. Here we go. 2m plus 5 equals 5 times m minus 7 minus 3m. This is where it's going to get good. What do I have to do? I have a set of parentheses. I have to get rid of the parentheses. I cannot solve m minus 7, so I have to distribute the 5 to the m and then to the 7. I'm going to rewrite my problem. 2m plus 5 equals 5 times m is 5m. 5 times negative 7 is negative 35 minus 3m. Rewriting it. Okay. Whew, I got a lot of them. I'm going to go ahead and highlight. What do I have? I have my numbers. I always do my numbers first. Positive 5 and a negative 35. Can you take a wild guess at what I'm going to do? Yeah, I'm going to bring the 5 over. So the opposite of positive 5 is a negative 5. Bring down anything I did not solve. 2m, that gives me a big fat 0, equals 5m. Negative 35 and a negative 5 is a negative 40. And then minus 3m. Now let's take a look at my variables. I have a 2m, a 5m, and a negative 3m. Before I do anything, notice I have a 5m and a negative 3m on this side. I'm going to combine those before I do anything. So I'm going to rewrite what I don't use. 2m, 5m minus 3m is 2m minus 40. Now I can move my m over to the other side, and the opposite of positive 2m is a negative 2m. And I'm going to solve. Ooh, look at that. That gives me a 0, and that gives me a 0, leaving me with a negative 40. Whenever I have two zeros on both sides, notice I have a big fat 0 here and a big fat 0 on this side of the equation. Guess what? That's called a big fat no solution. You can't do it. When your variables are eliminated, you have no solution. Okay? I'd like to do one more problem, solving equations with variables on each side with fractions. The problems we did previously with fractions, we pretty much took the larger number that's in the denominator and we multiplied everything by it. I want to make it clear to you that we need to find, in order to multiply everything by a number and get rid of the denominator, we need to find a multiple. As you can see, we have the numbers 4 and 3 on the bottom. So I'm going to make multiples of 4. I got 4, 8, I'm just counting by 4s, 12, 16, and I'm going to make multiples of 3. 3, 9, 12. If you notice, 12 is a common multiple. That's what I'm going to multiply everything by. Multiply everything by 12. So let's break it down for you. I'm going to say 12 times 1/4 minus 12 times 2/3 y equals, go ahead and erase this so I have room. Now I'm going to say 12 times 3/4 minus, and then 12 times 1/3 y. Now I can go ahead and show you the short way, or I can show you the long way. The short way says this: 12 divided by 4 goes into 12 3 times. 3 times 1 is 3. What I did was I divided both numbers by 4 minus, now I have 12 and 3. I'm going to divide both numbers by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 12 divided by 3 is 4. And 4 times 2 is 8y. Bring down my equal sign. Now I have 12 and 4. I'm going to divide both of them by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 12 divided by 4 is 3, and 3 times 3 is 9. Minus, I have 3 and 12. I'm going to divide both of them by 3. I'm dividing by the greatest common factor. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 12 divided by 3 is 4. And 4 times 1 is 4. Don't forget your y. Now I'm going to go ahead and move my variables. I have 3 and 9. I'll move my numbers to one side, move my variables to the other side. After watching this video, you know I like moving my numbers first, and I always move my smallest number. The opposite of a positive 3 is a negative 3. Three and negative 3 equal a big fat 0. I have a negative 8y equals 9 minus 3 is 6, negative 4y. Now that I moved all my numbers over to this side, I'm going to move my variables over this side. Remember, when you're moving variables or numbers from one side of the equation to another, you're adding and subtracting. The opposite of negative 4y is a positive 4y. So I'm going to add 4y to both sides. And I'm going to solve. I'm only solving my coefficients. Negative 8 and positive 4 is a negative 4y equals, I didn't do anything with my 6, and this equals a big fat 0. Now I comes in my multiplication division. I need to separate the negative 4 and the y. They're connected by multiplication glue. The only way to separate them is to use the opposite, which is division. So I'm going to divide both by negative 4. Y equals, now I can reduce this by dividing both by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. And I get a negative 3 halves, or a negative 1 1/2. Okay? Thank you for watching how to solve equations with variables on each side.